The moderator for our next panel, Pete, are you here? Don't freak me out like that twice. There we go. The moderator for our next panel is Mr. Pete Dumont, who's Managing Director of AG&P Americas and CEO of the Prairie Dog Venture Partners. More on that shortly. Joining Pete are Pascal Ray, CEO and co-founder of Blue Clarity, Randy Abdullah, Executive Vice President of Wallbridge, and Don Bowden, founder and chairman of Builder Chain. They're going to come to the stage. Come on, fellas, come ahead. They're going to come to the stage now and share with you some exciting news about one of the offshoots of Kurt some years ago. And Pete then will moderate his own Q&A. So he has the little magic. It's Stephen Moore. I forgot, Stephen. I just overlooked you. I'm sorry about that. I'll owe you one. Okay, I'll buy you a drink tonight. But let's give an applause for these folks. We appreciate their coming out and being a part of us. And let's give our attention to the next presentation. The bios, reminding you again, the bios are in your app. And so we don't do extensive introductions. And the PowerPoint presentations that you'll see today are also in your app. So let's enjoy what Pete and company have to share. Pete, come ahead.
All right. Thank you, Greg. And once again, a pleasure to be with everybody this year. Good to see so many familiar faces. So what we're going to share today are some developments that we've been sharing over the last couple years and kind of take a peek under the hood at some of the latest advances we're making now in building this capital projects exchange. So before we get going, though, I do want to, again, just remind everybody of our panelists up here, and I'll let them all introduce themselves as they go into their section. So with that, I'm just going to start with a bit of a brief introduction and a little bit of a background. So those of you that were here last year kind of heard this theme of a new ecosystem for capital projects. In fact, yesterday, if you were here, Clay with KPMG used that term several times, new ecosystems, as he was looking into this 2030 vision, at least from KPMG's standpoint, into where our industry's headed. We very much resonate with that whole idea of the need for a new ecosystem for capital projects. This is an example of one that's in balance. Every organism has a role to play. Everything is in harmony. Our industry desperately needs that, and we've been really operating with the same business model and generally in the same ecosystem with the same behaviors, the same types of contracts for really a long, long time. And while we've had advances in technology and new project management systems and planning techniques and so forth, those are all great and necessary, but we still find ourselves in a business climate that is largely unhealthy. Projects are costing too much. We have a lot more infrastructure that the earth needs to build, especially now sustainable infrastructure, and we need the means and methods and new business model in order to do that. Our ecosystem today is anything but in balance, unfortunately, but we're the largest industry in the world by almost any measure, whether you measure GDP, whether you measure annual spend. You heard Jim yesterday, Jim Ellis, talk about the industry's forecasted to be about $20 trillion industry in the year 2035. Last year it was $13 trillion industry, just to give you a feel for this kind of growth. And a lot of that's going to be driven by ESG, sustainability, low carbon initiatives, and so forth. And we're going to see more and more spend in those types of areas. But we have a very fragmented, highly litigious industry still, unfortunately. And the very nature of the industry, the structure of the supply chain, creates a lot of this inefficiency, where we basically have, layer upon layer of the supply chain with nested contracts and purchase orders. And when requirements and risk get pushed down from the top, often to the smallest and least financially healthy companies in the industry, that gets priced very expensively at those lower levels of the supply chain that get bubbled right back up to the top with markup upon markup upon markup. And if you've heard us talk about a 40% waste factor, that's ultimately the root of how that happens. And we still stand by those numbers. Now, the new capital projects exchange we're talking about is a radical reimagining of how we're going to do business in this industry. And this is something that's going to leverage technology, leverage a new business model, leverage new approaches in finance and risk and insurance, which our panelists today are going to get into more details around that. But this isn't just an exchange of ideas or a way to exchange business development leads. This is an actual commerce exchange where we're going to buy and sell and exchange goods and services in a healthier business climate that's going to lower capital costs and at the same time increase profitability for participants. How do you get both? Removing so much transactional waste from the system. So the math actually works quite well. Now, there's some key design elements that are very important to kind of get your head around that are going to differentiate this from many of these point solutions we have in the industry. First of all, anyone can play. This is an exchange for the entire global industry. No one's excluded. You're all welcome to participate. And by the very design of it, the legal construct of this is going to be open to all participants. And it's also got really a theme to it. You've heard us talk about neighborhood, community. You know, the legal maxim used in capital projects today is caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, okay? And that gets us into the world of contentious contracts and risk shifting. The future legal model is uberrima fides, where in Latin that means, utmost good faith. And so we really have to change the legal maxim about how we operate to drive greater value much faster in the industry. And this is focused on capital efficiency. Our theme today, how do we get more construction for the money? That's what this is about. We've got to build more facilities, sustainable facilities for society, because the earth needs more than what we can currently deliver as an industry. Our whole theme today is really, or this whole conference has really been around scarcity. Scarcity of resources, scarcity of capital. Greg gave a great example of that this morning. The fog, the inability to really optimistically look forward with, in order to drive the things in the industry we need to drive. Compensation models that actually create aligned behavior, shared success model. If any of you know Tony Bazzini, he was a chair of ECC. He was really been a big believer in shared success contractual models. We agree. Leveraging AI and blockchain and similar technologies to drive faster value, and then participant-led peer-based governance system. And what's important about that is joint accountability. It's one thing to have collaboration. It's another to have joint accountability, holding each other accountable for performance in every measure of what we do in the industry. And so there's a design architectural blueprint behind this exchange that's taking shape. You don't need to read all this stuff. It's just an illustration to show you that there's some work that's happening around this. And there's some key technology pillars that are important to underpin this. And one of those is blockchain, smart contracts and blockchain. And we've talked about that over the last couple of years. So what I want to do is share with you for a minute about what we've done there. We've had a recent, some accomplishments there that I want to share that we're excited about. But first of all, some of you may not know what a digital smart contract is, but essentially most natural language paper contracts are between two parties. What we do with a smart contract is just basically code that automates the executable aspects of a contract. But it can be n number of parties. You can have almost an infinite number of parties conjoined in a common digital contract. It doesn't just have to be two. And there's great power in that, by the way, the more companies that can be brought into this type of environment. It reduces friction and transactional cost and so forth. And we began with concrete. Why? Well, after water, it's the second most common material used in the entire world. In the U.S. alone, we spend about $1.1 trillion a year on concrete. And it's also notorious for probably being the dirtiest building material in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So responsible for about 8% of all greenhouse gas emissions globally, just concrete alone. So as we work into this environment of ESG and sustainability, we wanted to really tackle something that's used a lot. Almost every project uses it. There's a lot of green push in that space, and we can start tracking Scope 3 emissions, and that's a great place to start when we start talking about looking at being able to capture Scope 3 emissions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Randy with Wallbridge, and he's going to share some work we did with smart contracts and blockchain.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Randy Abdallah. I'm the Executive Vice President at Wallbridge. I lead the Get Work effort at Wallbridge Aldinger. Been in the industry 42 years, 25 of those with Wallbridge recently. Wallbridge is a Detroit-based top 40 general contractor, about $6 billion annually. And 95% of our clients are private clients in the repeat business. And I'd like to explain why we got involved and how we got involved with Pete and smart contracts and Prairie Dog. We've had a very strong demand for our construction services over the last 4 years. Just right around when COVID started, our opportunity list exploded. And that's the number one challenge. Number two is we've had to say no to a number of our foundational clients because we could not execute all the work that we were throwing at us. So our innovation fund is always looking for technologies, tools, processes that we believe can help reduce the number of man hours, make it more efficient, and make the whole journey that much easier. And that's where we learned about blockchain. One of our foundational clients in 21 came to us and said that would like to introduce us to Pete, Prairie Dog, and smart contracts. And when Pete and I talked, I had no idea what he was referring to, no idea what blockchain was. But as we discussed it more and more, it started to intrigue us. We took that information to our executive leadership team. We got their agreement to spend the money to experiment, to learn. We believe in learning. We know sometimes you'll fail, sometimes you'll succeed, but if you don't try, you're not playing at all. So we agreed to move forward. And then that was the simple part. The hard part was getting our IT security people to agree to move forward because they don't like you touching their systems at all. But we did. We worked around that issue, and then we started to look for a couple of opportunities where we could apply the smart and blockchain technology. And we did a couple of small pilots, one in San Antonio, Texas, the other in Spring Hill, Tennessee. But the big opportunity came when Walbridge was awarded the GC for a 10 million square foot manufacturing facility in Stanton, Tennessee, just outside of Memphis, $5.5 billion project. Our self-perform business unit was going to do the concrete and formwork. So what better opportunity where we're the contractor, they're the subcontractor. We could manage that whole blockchain, smart contracts, and got a number of there's multi-parties, there was a rebar, there was concrete supply, there was material supply. So we put that all together and then executed that effort. And it's still ongoing, but just last December, we had all the teams sit down and said, look, give us a report on how we've been doing over the last year and a half while we've been doing this work in Stanton, Tennessee. And we got back this report that sort of gives you the value assessment that they have come to us. Now this is all operational folks. It's not any marketing people or sales people involved. There is probably a sense of accuracy on some of this information. If you want to go on the conservative side, you could maybe say 3.5 million. On the more aggressive side, you could say maybe upwards of 10 million. But these are the things that our folks and the team, and this included subcontractors, suppliers, rebar installers, rebar suppliers, all sat down and discussed what the benefits were. And there was clearly a yes vote for the whole effort that we went forward with. There was time savings by the contractor, the general contractor. There was back-of-house accounting and operational savings. There was reduction in the field. The field people did not have to fumble around with concrete tickets and rebar delivery receipts, go back to their office and re-enter them to make sure that they have tracked all that information. It was all done on iPads or on the phone, in the field, real time, and automatically all the paperwork and all the invoices were automatically generated for that work. And the option to pay at that point was available as well. And that's why we were able to generate early paid discounts. So these are cost avoidance and cost savings, but it truly was a success in Walbridge's mind. Some of the soft benefits, data visibility and transparency to all the parties, so our client saw what was going on and how it was operating. There's no paperwork. There's no paper involved. The information was all there, but there was not a lot of information on paper. All the information was secure, just like your coins, your whatever they're called now.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, that's it. I don't believe in those things, but those Bitcoins, all that information was available, just like that, so it's secure. Everything was real time, didn't have any issues with any of that, but it was a complete success in our minds. The information, by the way, is all available. You can download it to other programs. It all talks. So that we also asked them what we felt the next steps were, and they told us we need to expand the smart contract effort into something a little bit bigger and more complex. Concrete was complex, but maybe mechanical and electrical systems would be the next step, something even more complex and a longer duration. Far more parties would be involved in that case. So we're working with Pete and Prairie Dog and their teams to figure out what that would look like. But something else came out of all of this, and I don't know if any of your clients have declared carbon neutral by a certain date, but we have 7 of our clients have said they're going to be carbon neutral by anywhere from 2035 to 2050. And we're now starting to find out what that means to us as a contractor and what it'll mean to every supplier and vendor in this room. Counting carbon. I'll give you an example. General Motors has agreed that EcoVadis will be the system that they certify their carbon on. EcoVadis has 4 pillars of sustainability, and in the carbon pillar, there's 3 groups of carbon, group 1, 2, and 3. 1 is your offices and your company vehicles. 2 is your offices and the field offices and your field vehicles. And 3 is the one that's going to be a game changer. 3 is carbon embedded in the building or in the facility you're building, and all the carbon needed to build the facility. That's going to be everything from ceiling tiles, carpet, asphalt paving, concrete, sidewalks. So how is the general contractor going to tell a client how much carbon is in that building? So every vendor and supplier is going to have to provide the information. John Mansville is going to have to tell us how much carbon is in their roofing material. Nucor is going to have to tell us how much carbon is in their steel. And their owners have also told us they're going to start looking at, EcoVadis has a scoring system. If you don't meet the minimum scoring system, you're no longer a vendor with General Motors. So we've gone through 2 years of EcoVadis certification. We're not there yet, we're getting there. We have 2 more years to get to where we need to get. We're learning. We have, 70 people involved in our organization in committees and subcommittees working on what all this means to us as Walbridge. It hasn't filtered down much further than the contractor yet because we're still learning. But it's going to be a game changer. It's coming. It's happening already in Europe. And they're going to make decisions on awards. They've told us they're going to make decisions on awards. So given safety and quality as a standard, price, time has always been the next 2. The third one's going to be carbon. So it's going to be 3-dimensional now when they make a decision on how much carbon is it going to take to build that building, how much is it, what's the time, and how much is the cost. And they will balance that because carbon will be almost a trading credit or some kind of a currency in the future. So it's going to be an interesting next little while. But we're using blockchain as a way to help us manage the carbon as we bid work or as we put work in place. So that's our story.
Thanks, Randy.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Mulva. I'm a research professor in the Department of Construction Science at Texas A&M University. I've been there since the summer of 2022, and my job essentially is a little bit like Randy's, which is to go get the money, but in this case for research. So in January of last year, January of 23, working with my colleagues, I came up with this idea called the Insurance Institute for Construction Safety and Research. And it's been under wraps until right now. So this is the world premiere. No gasps or anything, but what this is about, and if you've ever seen the insurance, there is an Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. Has anybody ever heard of that? They're the people who do the crash testing of the cars. The thing that you need to know about that is that's where a lot of the innovations in the automotive sector have come from, because in crash testing cars, they came up with innovations like anti-lock brakes and airbags and stability control and a lot of those kinds of things. There also is an Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety, and that they operate a 6-story wind tunnel in South Carolina, and so you can actually simulate a Category 5 hurricane and see how different building designs perform. But for the built environment, we're missing, this is why we're doing this, because we're missing this element of research in construction in the built environment. And we have an opportunity now at Texas A&M because we have so much land. We actually occupy 2,400 acres of the former Bryan Air Force Base nearby Bryan, Texas. And the Texas A&M system has invested $1 billion in that just in the last 5 years. They've given us 14 acres, and we've raised to date over $125 million to build some facilities to do leading edge cutting, and I'll say physical research about the built environment. And so these things will result in innovations that our faculty and faculties and researchers and companies that work with us create. They'll be disseminated through forums just like Kurt. And then if you know anything about Texas A&M, 12 is a magic number. And so we have the 12th man. Seattle Seahawks copied that, a few years back. I think there might have even been a lawsuit, but regardless, we have 12 labs, and I'm going to talk about one of them that I'm directing called Formation. Before I do that, just to give you an example of what does this look like in the built environment, we have very precision geospatial data that can help first responders get in a building. We know where they are within about 6 inches. We also know where the people they're rescuing are, and so we can save lives this way. The industry has a lot of data. You all have a lot of data, but it's not categorized. It's not available. Pascal will probably talk a bit about that because the key to good underwriting is having great data. The nice thing about a university, and I did benchmarking for a dozen years at the rival university, University of Texas, but what that was all about is a university is a neutral, impartial place to have data. And so we've realized, and we have systems to do that. We can also really reduce underwriting costs. We can reduce workers' comp costs. A huge problem in our industry is the underwriting of risk and the premiums associated with insurance. This is a growing, you guys know this is a growing number on any project estimate or working with any company. So we actually have some housing innovation where we've reduced the number of workers needed by 95%. This is really good news because half of construction is residential. So if we can move the skilled trades out of residential and put them into heavy civil, industrial, everything else that you can't manufacture in a factory, that's a big deal. There's things like technology performance guarantee insurance, and this is aiding the energy transition. If you have like a solar farm and you say it's going to produce 100 megawatts, but it only ends up doing 95, the insurance comes in and covers that. What are they covering? They're covering the benefit. This is an interesting point. They're insuring the benefit. So just remember that for my second slide. We have full motion simulators to aid safety as well. Think about full motion simulation for aircraft. And how they train pilots. We can do the same thing for cranes, heavy equipment. But the part that I've worked on, and since 2016, for the last 8 years, we've raised and spent $6 million. It may be one of the largest research initiatives in our industry in the last 100 years. But it was to figure out how do we really solve this issue of the commercial ecosystem. And I'm here to tell you that the capital stack that's required to do this can be reduced by as much as 93%. That's the initial capital outlay. It's important for companies that are, I'll say, startup companies or emergent companies, but it's also important for very established companies that are looking at things like energy transition. How do you greenify an entire portfolio of a company that's valued in the hundreds of billions of dollars? It's, this money just doesn't grow on trees. And so our industry can be a way to do that. So one of these 12 labs, the Formation Lab, the mission is to really revitalize the commercial environment, the commercial ecosystem, and to do projects in half the time and half the cost. Now, next week I'm going to a workshop on the West Coast, and we figured out how to build multifamily apartment buildings, total project in less than 4 months. And normally that takes, for a 350-door apartment complex, somewhere between 20 and 24 months. So we can get the time way down, but we can also get the money way down. We're about 30% less expensive than traditional construction. And again, we're so short on workers that if we can figure out some of this stuff, we can deploy our skilled trades in other areas. The last thing I'll talk about is industry transformation. What does it take to really transform an industry? And I think it always comes in 3 things. So if you think about the internet, what 3 things made the internet happen? Well, first of all, you had personal computing. Because if it was just big mainframes, you wouldn't need the internet. The second thing is we had telecom networks so that people could actually communicate. And the last thing, we had standards. We had TCP, internet protocols of how you would trade information. You could say the same thing about supply chain. Well, what happened in supply chain? Well, we had total quality management, we had just-in-time, and we had ERP systems like SAP or Oracle, right? Those combined, you put those things together. Well, what do we do in our industry? There's 3 things I would say that are foundational to revitalizing the commercial ecosystem. First is collaborative contracting. In the diagram that's up there, you don't see this pyramid scheme. What you see is a group of specialized people who can provide goods and services, but kind of at all together. Very flat ecosystem. How can you do that? Well, you use the computer. You use a digitally connected project neighborhood. And so that's what all of us have been working on for a while. Second thing is project finance. So this isn't corporate finance, this is project finance. Project finance, for those of you who don't know, means that the debt service on the project is paid for by the revenues created solely by the project. Sometimes it's called non-recourse project financing or non-recourse throughput financing. Non-recourse means that you don't go back to the parent company. The project has to live and survive completely on its own economics. This is where the benefit comes back. How do you ensure that the benefit from the project is going to be there at the end? Think of a toll road. You project so many cars go through, but if all those cars don't go through, right, there's a loss, there's an economic loss. How are you going to prevent that? That's the third one, that's insurance. And it's insurance not just for the risks that you're taking on, it's insuring the benefit of the project. And so there's a whole series of integrated insurance coverages that we're working on. The big news is later this year, we're going to break ground on a real project, $910 million. We're going to do that with an initial capital outlay of $143 million. And at the end of the project, after the reimbursements are back, it's only going to cost $57 million. This is for a nearly $1 billion project. How do you do that? It's the combination of these 3 things. It's also, we need special purpose vehicles. There's a lot of research that's been done in the legal environment, unique tax treatments. There's things like ECAs that are involved here, different financial products that move a lot of the CapEx into the OpEx. There's a whole series of kind of very intricate financial models that go into that, but also insurance solutions. That's probably the biggest one, I would say, is the biggest thing plaguing our industry is risk and not really understanding what risks we're looking at. A lot of times we see that people are insuring things that they shouldn't, and they're completely ignoring things that they really should focus on and talk to professionals like Pascal who can really figure out how to cover those risks that they're not covering.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm Pascal Ray. I've been in the insurance industry for a little over 35 years. Spent most of my career in London. My background is mostly energy infrastructure, so that's the perspective that I'm coming from. So just to jump in, so data is the origin of all value in financial services, okay? So the better the data, the better your outcome's going to be. And this is significant with the new data sets that are becoming available. We're going to see many new transformative types of insurance come out. And if you take a look at the solar industry in the United States, the Department of Energy has an initiative called the Orange Button. We have common common terms, common data, and common tools to manage that data. And what they've been able to do and what we've been able to do with them on the insurance side is absolutely phenomenal. We hope to do that in the construction side too. So the new data is going to drive new innovation in insurance products. We hope that we'll have standardized data to where everybody's on the same page, and we're hoping that happens as soon as possible. Blockchain is a game changer for us. So if you take, just stepping back a little bit, if you take blockchain and you take contractual risk management, it is the best risk management tool there is. Very, very few people are using it. I personally don't know anybody who's using blockchain to manage their contractual risk, and it's absolutely, the best tool available for that. But it also brings a lot of other value, not by itself, but when you pair it with other things. When you pair blockchain with smart contracts, that is the dynamic duo that unlocks unbelievable value, especially in the financial services industry. And so I'm an insurance guy, and you're going to say, why do you keep saying financial services? 4 years ago, the Department of Energy told me, hey, get out of your silo, go talk to these guys in the capital market. Have you ever talked to a surety bond underwriter? No, I'm a property casualty. I've never. So we've started talking to each other, and the silos are coming down, and we're starting to do things differently. My company is dedicated to changing business models and making things more efficient. The insurance industry has just as many problems as the construction industry, so don't think you're the only ones. We have many same issues, and they all get back to data. So with blockchain, you have immutable records. With smart contracts, it allows you to does many things, but it allows you to execute contract terms very, very rapidly. It increases velocity of cash. People can be paid immediately, even on the insurance side, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So these tools bring transparency to the transaction, brings consensus to the transaction, creates this incredible alignment of interest. And then if you go to working under the legal maxim of utmost good faith, that's even more of an alignment. Then when you add the technologies that are available for risk monitoring, okay, and then you add real-time risk analytics, it can change the construction industry's risk profile in a major, meaningful and substantive sense. So when you have these working together, you get an increase in true efficiency, okay? And when you have an increase in efficiency and risk are directly related. You have a decrease in risk, okay? That increases certainty in a number of different areas, including insurance, for insurance underwriters. That increased certainty, reduce costs, and your profitability goes up for all parties involved. So this is this new data and these new technologies and operating in an ecosystem on a platform changes everything. So let me give you an idea. I know this is super busy, so don't worry, I'm not going to go into this. We're not going to read it or anything, but it's just to give you an idea of what can be done with data. There is a risk transfer product called parametric insurance. It is mostly used for weather-related events like hurricanes and floods and droughts and things like that. But if you look at the top line, those are all of the steps that are necessary to get your claim paid. If you have an event, those are all the steps that are necessary to get a claim paid. And how many people in here have had a construction claim paid in less than 3 months? Not one hand. How many people have had claims that have taken over a year?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. A few of you. Okay, so when you change the type of insurance to parametric insurance, the insurance policy is a smart contract. And when the coverage trigger is enacted, a wire transfer takes place. That's how quick the claim is paid. And so these are the types, and so parametric insurance is one type of insurance that we're just now starting to use this in construction, in energy infrastructure construction. But there are a lot of other risk transfer ways to transfer risk that exist in the industry. So So you're going to get faster and better service from your insurance carrier with better data and different insurance products. So you're also eliminating the transactional waste, right? So when you're using a digital platform, the slide shows 40% waste. That could be higher, that could be lower. But the point of this is to show as you transfer risk, and if you're doing this on a digital platform, using a new business model, you're using your risk transfer capacity much better, and your operational costs are going to drop, and your transactional waste is going to drop in the process. So this new data and these new ways to use this data, it's not just for insurance. It's also for the financial markets, and it's also for the carbon markets, and it can also be used for the trade credit insurance markets, which could be a great new insurance solution for the construction industry. So this additional data creates additional certainty and it allows insurance underwriters to do better things and to do different things. So tail risk is a killer in the construction industry. And it's a combination of what risk you know and the risks that you don't know. And there are lots of statistics out there, but the tail risk cripples many projects over the course of time. And operating in an ecosystem on a digital platform, and you're quantifying all these risks using these new risk management techniques, using technology to manage risk. You're quantifying the known risks, and you're moving the tail risk out, and the tail risk is much smaller than it was before, and it allows insurance underwriters with this additional certainty on the tail risk. It allows insurance underwriters to come in and do new things for tail risk, which I think would be transformative for the industry. Okay, and then we're going to talk about just transactional waste in the insurance industry as it goes. A few years ago, Amazon got into the insurance business. In some ways, it's been really good for them. In some ways, it hasn't worked out too well. But this was their model. They started with the customer, and then they went to the risk capacity markets. And a lot of people don't realize that, the insurance company that's covering your insurance projects, that insurance company also buys insurance. That insurance company also buys insurance. Then you go into the insurance-linked securities market, catastrophe bonds, and that risk gets further moved back into the capital markets. Okay, there's a lot of different ways to transfer risk. The way Amazon did it was they just said, okay, we're going to cut out this traditional insurance value chain, and we're going to go directly to the risk capacity markets. Okay, and then they used a digital insurtech platform to accomplish that. So, a retail insurance broker in many ways adds value, and there are wholesale brokers. There's lots of parties involved in an insurance transaction that you may or may not be aware of. But I can tell you this, the acquisition costs for insurance are super expensive. In Lloyd's of London, for an underwriting program for a company like mine, the average commission is 35%. So that's a third of the insurance premium that's going to commissions. Okay? The last underwriting contract that I got, that I received in the industry, the commissions were 50%. So I'm making this statement to say there's room, and you don't have to buy insurance in the traditional way. There are many different ways to transfer risk. Okay, and there's and we need to lower costs across the board, and this is. So changing the way you buy insurance, bringing new data to the process, working it with a digital ecosystem is it's unbelievable what will be able to happen in terms of lowering costs and also having better insurance products. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pascal. My name's Don Bowden. I'm with Builder Chain. I'm founder and chairman of Builder Chain, and we're providing a construction industry network that's, I think, doing some pretty interesting things. So let me kind of advance the slides here. Okay. And we're not going to read this entire list of bullet items here, but let me kind of make a couple of points. First, what is the difference between a network and a market network? Well, let's share the fact that digital markets leverage B2B commerce technology, which provides a more efficient procurement process. There was a recent study of purchasing agents saying they like digital commerce because they can acquire more detailed information than what they have had in the past. Also, a digital marketplace will accommodate multiple vendors and provide and surface a variety of resources for material and labor in a uniquely convenient and seamless way. New project delivery methods can be more effectively harness a digital marketplace, and within the context of collaboration and value delivery. And then consolidating communication to a project-centric central hub where new project delivery can have governance applied digitally via the latest in Web3 technologies. Okay. I think this is a really important point about emphasizing the value of a network. It's different from point solutions. And with the advent of mobile devices, point solutions have brought a lot of value to the construction process. But as we look to achieve the next wave of operational productivity, we must move beyond simple point solutions and to a more holistic approach. Everyone wants to take advantage of blockchain technologies like smart contracts and tokenization, but the real value will be achieved when it's cast within a construction project's operational framework. Here is a slide about our technology partner, Palantir. We're very excited about this. This is an incredible company. They have a lot of very high-profile customers, including the Defense Department, and as well as BP Oil and several hospitals, Tampa General, Cleveland Clinic, Mount Sinai. They also have major insurance providers like Munich Re and Swiss Re. And a big one is BP Oil. They've been a long-time customer of Palantir and had real impact on their operational efficiency. So now we are an industry that can leverage the same success that Palantir has achieved with other industries. We're partnered with Blue Clarity and Prairie Dog and Builder Chain ourselves to leverage Palantir technology and bring it into the construction market, not as a company implemented silo, but actually driven from project initiation. So you don't have to install Palantir in your company. You simply start a project, you turn on these resources, and they're available to you in a very easy and comprehensive way. I like to compare Palantir and the construction industry in the case that they have a lot of similar characteristics. Palantir knows the value of having a comprehensive real-time view of the digital battlefield. And one of the challenges the Defense Department had was they had 4 branches of military branches, and they all had their own data silo and their own taxonomy. And what was unique about Palantir was bringing those independent, desperate data sources into a common operational fabric. So I think the parallels between military operations and construction operations are very similar. Next is how can these new innovative business models drive operational advantage? The technology is used to support new business models. only when these new technologies are cast within the operational framework are there unique benefits realized for that business value. Although much has been discussed about AI and its future impact, AI depends on grounded in real operational data for its value to be truly realized in a business enterprise scenario. And certainly construction fits within that domain. Finally, I'd like to share this quote from Leonardo da Vinci. He said, "Learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else." And really, that characterized our need and objective in the construction industry. So thank you very much for your time, and we're here for questions after that.
Yeah, thanks everybody on the panel. So that whole convergence of forces Don just talked about, I think is really important. I mean, everything we talk about in forums like this, none of these topics, these challenges we face in the industry are mutually exclusive. They're all interwoven, and one issue affects all the other issues. And so we really do need to look holistically at a broader scale solution set to really start to move business results in the industry. So that's what this whole body of work is about. As Dr. Mulva said, it started several years ago with some research. That research is continuing, and in parallel with the continuation of the research, we're developing pieces of this and getting those implemented. So one thing that I will offer up to anyone in the room or companies you work with is, as we're launching pieces of this, we do plan immediately to start launching some boot camps. And those are going to be almost like these sprint teams that Kurt has. They're going to be very targeted, very time-sensitive, solution set, solving key solutions. You can come to that with any data that you have. We've got a group now working on lining out what some of these boot camps could be, so we can start to prove out some of this technology for our problem solving. Don mentioned the Department of Defense using it. I mean, what a good comparative to the construction industry. Here you have the military that has all sorts of resources, whether they're troops, tanks, aircraft carriers, fighter jets, guns, bombs, everything else, and having to deploy that optimally around the world in an ever-changing environment, in a geopolitical mess, and things happening and changing on a daily basis. How do you do that? Well, in the past, humans had to try to apply their experience and knowledge, but the problem sets are just too big and too complex for humans to do this. So technology like this is coming in to help us powered by AI and so forth, to really help us optimize these extraordinarily complex things. Well, that's a capital project, right? You got all kinds of companies, you got all kinds of products, you got all kinds of things that have to happen in the right sequence at the right time in an ever-changing environment. So let your imagination run wild in how we can really advance massive levels of collaboration and rapid improvement. So that's the whole purpose of those boot camps. So if any of you want to participate, and literally anybody is welcome, let us know. And with that, I want to ask a couple of questions. And I want to start with Dr. Balba. Could you maybe elaborate a little more? This whole thing on this capital stack piece, and I imagine there's skeptics in the room saying, wait a minute, I can build a $1 billion project for $57 million of upfront capital. Please explain. Can you go into a little more detail, on how that stuff is able to be accomplished?
So at a high level, and sorry for coughing, it turns out if you try to drink and breathe at the same time, it doesn't work well.
Moment.
So the big thing is you have CapEx and OpEx, right? And so what you're doing is, instead of trying to raise all the capital on the front end, you're trying to shift it onto the operating expense. And so if you think about operating a toll road, that's kind of what's happening. Now somebody, in the case of a current toll road that's $1 billion, somebody is coming to the forefront with a bond for $1 billion. What we've been able to do is figure out through some special purpose companies that are formed, and through some legal constructs, and it's kind of proprietary how it gets into the tax treatment and a lot of that, but you can effectively do this, and the special purpose company can achieve the project financing aided by the benefit of the insurance. So the insurance companies will insure the benefit that's coming out of that. And because of that, you can get by with having less upfront capital. So all the energy companies, for example, a lot of the big ones, they probably have $20 billion, $30 billion annual capital budgets, right? Those things are tripling now. So if they were doing 20 billion, they're doing 60 billion, and they're figuring out like, how do we do that? And so, or it's how do you build infrastructure on a shoestring budget? Governments have that issue. They don't have all that upfront capital. So they can leverage the community in terms of the financial strength of the community, got umbrella insurance over the top for the benefit, and you have some special purpose entities that come into play. But what you're really doing is you're just shifting, there's also a reduction of probably 15 to 20% conservatively just on executing in a collaborative environment. But beyond that, you're shifting basically the capital stack onto the operating expense.
Thanks. Any questions in the audience? I actually don't see any in the app. No questions. Interesting. Then I'll continue on. Randy, for you, from a Walbridge executive standpoint, this whole bidding cost schedule carbon is kind of how you describe that. What does that mean? Are you going to have to proclaim to your client what your how many tons of CO2 you're going to emit on your project, and then have to prove that? And if you miss it, you're going to get a penalty or something?
That's correct. That's what they're talking about. Is you're going to bid a certain level of carbon that you're guaranteeing that you're not going to exceed, and there'll be some sliding penalties if you don't hit that, because they're going to take that and they're going to take that to the market for carbon credits, or they're going to have to get to carbon neutral, they're going to have to offset those carbons with some other carbon technology. So there'll be, it's still all new to a lot of people. Really don't know where it's all going to head, but that's the conversation at this point.
Yeah. Are others in the room seeing that?
Anybody else experiencing it?
I see a hand up over here. Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Is there, you may have mentioned this and I missed it, is there a timeline in mind for the capital project exchange? I think, Stephen, you mentioned you're having there's a bunch of money committed to building it out. Is there a timeline in mind for kind of how that's all going to play out?
I think it happens over time. I mean, and Pete can offer an answer on that too, but what I've experienced doing research and working in this industry for 30 years is that people learn by doing, and they learn by watching other people's doing.
Mistakes.
And so I think some of this is, the human endeavor advances on trial and error. So we got to get out there and try some projects. That's basically it. What that does over time, though, is it grows into an ecosystem. We have an ecosystem in our industry, how we buy things, how we contract with companies, and we've got, 210 net 30 terms. Well, that came from somewhere, and that's part of our ecosystem, but it doesn't have to be there. And so I think what we do is we experiment in certain areas, and you guys are part of that. You don't have to take your entire project and dump it into, some thing that may seem pretty risky, although you can get insurance for that. You can just experiment a little bit at a time, let's try this, let's try that. And then over time, the shared journey we're on improves and builds out into an ecosystem. So hopefully I'm answering it.
Yeah, Trey, I'll add to that this whole experiential learning is why we want to do these boot camps. That does a few things. It actually starts to solve immediate problems and deliver immediate value. It enrolls people in the mission, right? Back to the military analogy. It enrolls companies. And over time, communities like this will start to move this industry forward through active learning and participation. This is going to take years to advance, and it will never be done. I mean, what we're on is a journey, technology-driven. In the world around us will continually evolve and change, which means we have to continually adapt to it. Where is AI and Web3 going to be 3 years from now? I don't know, but I guarantee you they'll be part of this fabric. They have to be, right? I'm actually surprised there's not more talk around Web3 in this forum, and I would expect to see more of it. Things like digital credentialing, everyone having their own digital wallet, Imagine craft workers now having their own digital wallet, not maintained in a central database necessarily, but everyone has that tagged to their own identity, just like you'd have your credentials of any sort, professional or degrees or whatever. What does that mean in a business setting? Well, what it means there is taking decisions out to the edge, out to the fringes of the business, to the field, to the points of where work is happening, and it starts to break down this whole idea of central databases. It takes this idea of an ERP and starts to, we're going to still have ERPs. I'm not here to challenge that, but it's going to be taking ERPs and putting that data, which is the data within four walls of a business, and combining it with data from all these other businesses, and then using AI to now put rapid decision-making at the front line. And how does that change how we handle projects, how we make decisions, the level of skill and talent that we need in the industry? These are all big existential questions that we're all going to be facing soon in this industry as this technology really starts to move forward. So, long-winded answer, it's going to be a journey, it's going to take some time, but that's why we're starting with some pieces of this now. So, questions, yeah.
Rob Wagner. Question just in general for the whole team on carbon credits and this whole, I'm a bit confused because I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, so we're going to put a tax or something on carbon. So I'm an international company. Does that mean I move all my to Malaysia, which is not going to be participating in the tax credits or the tax penalties, et cetera? Where do you think it's going to end up going and shifting? I would assume if the government is creating and capturing money from companies that it would go towards research, like things like Dr. Mulva's doing and things like this, or anyone is doing research in it. I just don't know. I haven't heard a lot about, other than I've heard about they're going to be capturing money from companies. That's all I really heard about, which sounds like a government grab versus a true emissions reduction, et cetera. So your opinions on it.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at it. We had a slide up here Randy showed that said insetting versus offsetting. Okay, so what most people have heard of carbon offsets. What you're really doing is you're not being greener. Someone else was greener, and you're buying a carbon credit to make yourself look greener on paper. That's Taylor Swift flying her jet, buys carbon credits to offset. Any Swifties in here? I'm not, by the way. Carbon insetting is actually lowering your carbon footprint through your direct actions to be greener. Therefore, to that extent, it's much more powerful because you're actually greenifying the planet for real. And if you want and you over-green it, you can sell those carbon offsets to the other people that want to buy them. So we're really about, there's the old adage, what gets measured gets improved. Using this type of technology at least allows us to have a common measurement system for carbon. What you do with that is up to you as a business or up to us as an industry, what we do with that, right? But we want the ability for, like, imagine a contractor now, like Walbridge or whoever, that now can measure their own carbon and do something with it. Like, you could create a whole new revenue stream because you're a greener company, you can now start to sell your carbon credits. And if you've got a major green initiative, you could be talking millions of dollars of carbon value that you now could have a whole new revenue stream for as a contractor that before you never could because you don't have the data. So the data unlocks a lot of potential value anyway. That's where we'll see where that goes, right? The big question is who takes the credit? The owner, the contractor, the sub-trades, some combination? I don't know that yet. I think the projects figure that out on their own. Yeah.
I work at an international company, and so carbon credits in North America versus carbon credits in Malaysia or elsewhere, like, not every country in the world is participating, is my understanding, based on the meetings of the G20, et cetera, and all of that, right? So I think it's all up in turmoil.
Complexity, correct? Yeah, there is no, and by the way, there's no real carbon data standards yet, like an ISO standard. Although there are some substandards, like there's some substandards popping up around the world for different things. Company in Canada, for instance, has created a concrete, we know that because we did concrete, a concrete standard for measuring carbon emissions. Will that be the global standard? I don't know, but there aren't any yet. Anyone else on the panel want to address this?
I think you did well, Pete.
Okay. Okay. There actually were questions in here, but I wasn't smart enough. A little bit ironic, a techie guy can't figure out how to use the iPad.
Pascal, did you want to say something?
Somebody did ask a question.
I think Pascal was going
Yeah,
to.
Oh, yeah.
Just to add to that, the insurance industry and the financial services industries are going to be requiring that carbon data. And so there's going to come a point in time where it may be difficult to get insurance or financing if you're not,
Doing it. Yeah.
doing your regulatory duties. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that'd be a big deal if you can't get insurance because you can't measure carbon. That will wake people up in a hurry. Randy, a question for you. What type of investment did Walbridge have to make to commit to the ESG goals of their owners? Is there any lessons learned you can share? Or is it still too early, perhaps?
It's really too early. I mentioned the committees that we've gathered internally, so there's 70 people or so working part-time. Right now, that's our commitment to try and sort this out. We've having regular meetings with EcoVadis, who seems to be the ISO-type certification entity that most of our clients have settled on. I'm sure there's others, but we're focused on EcoVadis. So we're trying to understand what the requirements are, trying to learn how we're going to educate our employees, trying to figure out how we're going to get our suppliers and vendors to participate and come to us with a bid with the carbon and how they're working to reduce their carbon, whether they're buying electric vehicles or using all electric tools, battery operated, whatever they're doing to reduce their carbon. We're trying to figure out how we're going to capture that. So we're really in the infancy stages.
If there's some people in the room, when we start talking about boot camps that have some solutions already emerging around this, we'd love to, we could create a pretty quick boot camp around some lessons learned around this to share that, to the extent anyone is willing to share it.
Sounds like a really good topic for Kurt to focus on.
And there's the ESG sprint team. We got time for one more question. It's a quickie, so I'll just add it in here. Somebody asked a question about what kind of commercial terms can be accommodated with a smart contract. The quick answer is any. You basically have any sort of business logic in your natural language contract, whether it's a lump sum type of logic, whether it's unit rate, whether it's T&M, whether it's cost reimbursable, whether you have incentives, whether you have a 10% retainage, whatever that logic is, any of that can be accommodated. And that was part of what the pilot looked at. We actually were working in kind of more a lump sum, and we had a lump sum and a T&M both contract being accommodated simultaneously. So anyway, to answer that. With that, I want to thank you all for your attention.
I've got another question.
We do have, okay.
I want to take a point of executive privilege, and Randy, I want to thank you for taking a step forward in this very important area. But I'm curious, what were the points that compelled your CEO and your executive management team to say, yes, let's try this and see what happens? I know you're curious as a company, and you always ask the what-if questions. We commend you for that. But what were the key points that got us to yes on this beta test, and what do you think were the greatest obstacles once we started?
The executive leadership team of Walbridge comprises of 21 individuals. So I took, I took Pete's concept, or Prairie Dog's concept, to that group and just outlined what Pete had been telling us, so this potentially could do. We have an innovation fund that supports new ventures like this, looking for things that might be game changers. And we know that we're going to succeed on some and fail on others. So it was kind of like a venture capital fund that we look at technologies that we think have the potential to really change the industry. So we saw that in smart contracts, blockchain management, speed of being able to pay. One of our biggest challenges right now with our clients is the projects have gotten so large in this country. There's hundreds of projects in excess of $1 billion being built right now. And when you're trying to do net 60, net 90-day terms, there's a lot of contractors' net worth that would, 2 months of invoices that go unpaid. there's probably at $1 billion program, that's more than a lot of construction companies' net worth. So they're putting a lot at risk. So what we're doing is we're looking for ways to speed the payment process to get the money into the hands of those subcontractors. So that was one of the things that we saw this potentially could really help owners, the contractors, subs, and suppliers. The biggest obstacle was our IT department. They were the biggest naysayer. They didn't want anything or anybody to touch their system, and rightly so. I mean, there's stats that Walbridge gets attacked something like 30,000 times a month by foreign hackers trying to attack our system. And we don't want to be the reason Ford Motor Company goes down. So we're really cautious with IT. But we did have some workarounds. We were able to get through it, and hence the program and the success.
All right. With that, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your attention. You got a great speaker coming up next, so stick around.